Welcome to the Asset Preservation Hour. I'm Rob Hurtig. I'm here with my good friend Stewart Willis. How are you doing?
Man, having a great time.
Man, I'm glad you had me. Thanks for letting me join you here today. I know we've talked about this for a while.
I'm glad you're here.
So what are we talking about today?
Well, what I'd like to talk about today again is Social Security. I know we've covered it on multiple shows before, but I think it's really important to emphasize how important it is on a retirement plan.
So I agree with you, and I think it's also a little bit misunderstood who actually Social Security maximization is for and who benefits from it, right?
Yeah, I think, years ago, we would run Social Security workshops and seminars all over Arizona. And, now we have offices in Tempe, Scottsdale, in the West Valley, and Sun City. But those big seminars that we used to do would teach people how to, take advantage of different strategies. We used to call them switching strategies.
Right.
And believe it or not, I always used to tell people Social Security would never be touched because senior citizens are the biggest voting bloc, right? And I was very convinced that nobody would ever take those benefits away. But believe it or not, in 2015, that all changed.
Bipartisan Budget Act, right?
Right, absolutely. So what the Bipartisan Budget Act did is it essentially got rid of these switching strategies, the file and suspend, the file and restrict options. So a lot of those really cool strategies for switching back and forth no longer exist. But I think it's still a very important topic.
I do too, but the people that think that Social Security is for them, it is for them, but the people that benefit the most from maximization are people that have other assets, people that have saved for retirement, people that want to protect those assets, pass them on to other generations, that leave money for their spouse, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So while you can't, the difference, for example, between taking it early and taking it late has been compressed. There used to be tremendous differences where, if you both take it early, 62, rather than delaying until 70, there used to be hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference between those different strategies. Now it's being compressed because of the restriction of those options. But the reason I think it's important to plan Social Security is, look, people have come into our office, they've done a good job of, putting money away in their 401ks, their IRAs, etc. But, they don't really plan on Social Security. And let's just say for a couple, for example, that has put away $1 million in their 401ks, their thrift savings plans, their IRAs, their Roths, whatever, they've done a good job of that, and they're here to talk about that. But they're not concerned about the $1.5 million of Social Security benefit over their lifetime. And I think it's a tremendous mistake.
Absolutely. So getting the filing strategy wrong can cost you substantially over your lifetime, not just in benefit, right? But what's at stake with other assets, using other assets early. You have to have the right plan that works for you, correct?
Yeah, no doubt at all. So I think it's really important to get the timing right, to figure out which one's right for you, which one's not. For example, most people realize that the earliest you can take your benefit is 62. And the latest you can take your benefit is 70. There is one moving part in there. It's called full retirement age. And, that started off at 65 years ago, and now it's moving up to 67. That one moving part, though, is having a tremendous effect on your benefit. Let me give you an example. So previously, when the full retirement age was 66, when you filed at 62, you were only getting 75% of your benefit. Well, now that the full retirement age is moving to 67 over time, you're taking more and more penalty for taking it early. That actuarial reduction is actually expanding. And by delaying your Social Security, most people realize they get an 8% delayed retirement credit, right? So people would wait till 70 and they get 132% of their benefit because it's 4 years of delay.
Sure.
Well, now there's only 3 years of delay for future filers. So you're getting less and less benefit by delaying. But what's important isn't about how much benefit you're getting per se, but it's about when you get that benefit. So at Asset Preservation, most people realize that we have a tax office built into our firm. And the whole purpose of that tax office isn't just to file your taxes for you. It's to do real tax planning. And remember, in 1983, Social Security became taxable for the first time.
Right.
And under Ronald Reagan. And then Bill Clinton made it more taxable.
Up to 85%, right?
Absolutely. And the one thing that makes it taxable, which most people don't understand, is all of your other taxable earnings. So any wages, any capital gains, dividends, IRA distributions, your required minimum distributions, your thrift savings plan distributions, any pensions you have. You add all of that up plus 50% of your Social Security benefit, that's your provisional income. Now, The interesting thing is there's a strategy that we've developed at Asset Preservation that's about maybe realizing some of those capital gains and dividends, and even maybe doing some Roth conversions before you file for Social Security, so that, you know, maybe it's possible to remain down into those lower brackets when it comes time to taking Social Security.
What you're saying is the repercussions for not doing it the right way, because it's not something that's independent by itself. There's so many other things you need to be looking at when you're filing for Social Security. You mentioned taxes, right?
Yep.
You need to be looking at everything else too, your accounts, guaranteed sources of income, the whole picture, correct?
Yeah, I think it's really important to take a complete view of everything that's going on in your Social Security. We're obviously, the Senate was just meeting recently. We've seen the CPI numbers of heading upwards of 9% here. And so do we really believe that we're going to see a 9% increase in your benefit? If under the current law, that's what's going to happen. But we're hearing rumors of some legislation that's trying to change how your Social Security is being calculated.
They're worried about the solvency of the fund already. So how is that sustainable if we are in stagflation, right? And we have 8.99% inflation for a persistent amount of time. What do we do? Something's got to give, correct?
It's going to be tough. And guess who they're going to target? They're going to target people with money, right? So as you know, people with money are the ones who carry the brunt of the tax burden now anyways. And so it's just way easier to tax the wealthy. And so what we do at Asset Preservation is we help create strategies to maximize your benefit and minimize your tax implication. And so I think it's really important to make sure you have a financial plan that includes tax planning.
Absolutely. Hey, actually, we're running out of time here, going into a commercial break. What's something we could do if you're somebody on the cusp of retirement or recently retired, and you're wondering about this stuff, haven't filed for Social Security yet? You want to know when's the best time to file? How's it going to work with my other assets? What are the tax repercussions? What can somebody do that's in that position?
Well, number one, I think it's important that you're dealing with a fiduciary that is a holistic planner. And by holistic planning, we mean, do you take a look at taxes? Do you look at your estate planning? Do you look at the whole picture at once? One of the key things that we do is, like I said at the beginning of the program, maybe it makes sense to realize some taxes now. Remember, at the end of 2025, these tax rates sunset and taxes go up. They're not going down. Someone's going to pay down this debt.
Right.
I think it's really important. What we're offering the audience today is a complimentary portfolio review. Now, inside that complimentary portfolio review, what we're going to look at is, when does it make sense for you to file for your Social Security? Will it benefit you by delaying? Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but you have to take action today. If you give us a call at 833-652-7829, we will take a look at whether or not it makes sense for you to delay, but you have to take action today.
Call 833-652-7829 to receive your complimentary retirement readiness review and Social Security maximization report. Get the most from your Social Security payments. Find a strategy that maximizes your Social Security benefit and preserves the assets you've saved for retirement. Social Security seems easy, right? The question is, should you take it now or later? There are numerous ways to file for Social Security. The decisions you make can also affect how much you pay in taxes. You've paid into Social Security for decades. Now, get the most out of your Social Security benefit. Call Stewart and his team, 833-652-7829, for your complimentary retirement readiness review and Social Security maximization report. Now you need to build that into a retirement income plan with all your assets. Call Stewart and his team right now at 833-652-7829 to receive your complimentary retirement readiness review and Social Security maximization report, or use the QR code on the screen to schedule your appointment today.
Welcome back to the Asset Preservation Hour. I'm Rob Hurtig. I'm here with my good friend Stewart Willis.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
No, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. I really do appreciate you having me on here. We had a good time talking about some important stuff, right?
Absolutely. You know what? Our phone conversations are awesome. I'm glad you could fly all the way from Kansas to be on my show.
I've been wanting to do this for a long time. You got something fun here. We're making history. Sounds awesome.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Listen, I think we're in crazy times right now. Obviously, the stock market is nuts, right? We are seeing the worst start to the stock market since the Great Depression, the worst start to a bond market since 1982.
When you said we're making history, I thought this was a good thing.
No, it's terrible. I'm glad to have you, but the market's terrible here. And listen, I always tell people I'm a man of leisure, and I want the market to be smooth and easy. I've had it really easy here for the last decade. Obviously, the market's done unbelievably well. The last year and a half, or actually the last 6 months or 7 months, 8 months, has been horrible.
Right.
And so being a man of leisure hasn't really worked in my plans here.
And you're not a doom and gloom guy. You don't like to talk about the negative. You don't like to talk about the loss. You like to talk about abundance and what could be, right? But I think it's, I don't know what your thought is on this. I think it's time to start raising the flags a little bit and letting people, turning on the sirens, let them know that there are troubles in paradise here, right?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Listen, it's not all doom and gloom, but it is, a scary time. But remember, you have to follow that quote from Warren Buffett. Be fearful when other people are greedy, and be greedy when other people are fearful. There are opportunities that are presenting themselves now for you to be able to take advantage of in this crazy time. So, Rob, I've told you before, we see things at asset preservation that a lot of people aren't looking for. Yeah. We're looking for opportunity. And I think one of the great opportunities that we have is this tax environment that we're in right now. And with this suppressed market right now, I usually tell people we don't do any sort of tax planning until the end of the year, because we want to be able to look back on the year, do Roth conversions, realize your gains and losses, and do all that stuff here towards the end of the year. But right now, there's one exception, and that's when we see a down market. So market's down 20+%. Maybe it makes sense to catch that rebound tax-free. And here's what I'm talking about. So most people realize that when they convert their IRA to Roth, they have to pay the taxes now. Now, let's flash back to, January and February of 2020, when the COVID epidemic first hit, right? Sure. We saw a massive drop, 32% down on the S&P 500. Now, just imagine if you would have converted all of your 401ks to Roth at that exact time. Now, if you would have done that, and you would have basically seen a doubling of your value over the next 6 months in that amazing market that we encountered, you'd have done it all tax-free.
Right.
So sometimes it makes sense to be able to catch the dips in a more efficient manner. And so while the stock market is down and the bond market is down, maybe it makes sense for you to really take advantage of it.
So you see people all the time. You have a radio show, you have a television show. I know you do public events as well. The people that you're meeting with, are their financial advisors talking to them about this stuff? Because that's the real question.
Well, you know what? It's a tough conversation. I mean, I used to get 3 or 4 calls a day, and now I'm getting 40 a day. My clients all have my personal cell phone number, and I think it's a really important thing. I was on vacation. I just got back from Italy not too long ago, and I was taking calls. It was 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm taking calls. But you know what? I'm only in Italy because of my clients. I wouldn't be living that life without them, right?
Did you tell them that they had nothing to worry about because of the 60-40 portfolio and the target date funds? Did you tell them they're okay?
Well, I think that's the thing. I mean, I think a lot of people over the last decade have, tried to push the easy button to take the easy way out.
Yeah.
These target date funds, I've really hammered them in the past, and I'll continue to do it. People think it's a set it and forget about it thing. They see, look, I'm going to retire in, 2025, so I pick a 2025 fund, and that should be good over time. But remember, what we've seen is for the last 35 years, interest rates have fallen. For the last 12 years, the market has gone through the roof. A blind chicken could have done well. So what they've done is they've picked, in these target date funds, all these asset allocation models that, that don't really apply right now, right? So does it really make sense to have a heavy long-term bond allocation in a rising interest rate environment?
We talked about some of these numbers from target date funds and also from 60-40 portfolios, where the bond portion of the portfolio is down anywhere from 8 to 20%, right? And that was supposed to be the safety mechanism.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, is a 15 to 20% downside conservative? I don't know. I mean, maybe we're redefining what that is, but we are in this correlated market where all asset classes have dropped in value. And so I think it's really important to reconsider, these classical asset allocations. Does it really make sense? Is your portfolio really diversified? Because a lot of people look at their portfolio and say they want a diversification of their investments. But what about a diversification of perspectives? Listen, if you're dealing with a financial advisor that's picking your stocks and your mutual funds for you in front of you and says, hey, this is what I think is good for you, I think this one and this one, that's a problem. Because my question to you is, Rob, what if he's wrong? What if she's wrong? Because, listen, we use multiple money managers. We have the biggest money manager in the world overseeing part of our portfolio.
Right.
We have an algorithm money manager. We have, an amazing guy, David Young, out of Newport Beach, California, spent 14 years at one of the biggest bond houses in the world. He's an amazing money manager.
Right.
But they're not going to be right all the time. So you're going to bet your entire life savings on this person or that person being right? Or are you betting your entire life savings on the nice guy across the desk from you being correct?
Well, so how does someone even know? Because you and I have talked about this a lot. If you're a doctor, medical terms mean the same thing across the country. Attorneys, when we're talking law, legal terms, a legal term means the same thing here in Arizona as it does in California, as it does in New York City.
Sure.
Or New York State. When it comes to our industry, and just even risk, we'll just use risk as an example. Is that term standardized in our industry?
No, I think, it's a moving target. People see it differently. I think the one thing we do is we take a really deep dive view of how we assess risk, because, are you properly diversified from an investment perspective? What kind of perspectives are being reflected? Like I said, once again, if your fund company or your big box retailer is buying things, what we're starting to see is tons of overlap. So if you have a mutual fund from that company, oftentimes that mutual fund, if it's under the same brand, they're all holding the same things. There's tons of overlap. So
correlation.
The correlation coefficient is the measurement of how similar or dissimilar these funds are. And are you really diversified?
So we're getting ready to go to break. So how would somebody find out how they're positioned? Is it proper for where they're at this phase in retirement?
Yeah, it's about as important as anything. What we would suggest is take advantage of our complimentary portfolio review. We'll take a look at what kind of risks you're taking, what kind of fees you're paying. Are you really diversified? You have to take action today. Give us a call at 833-652-7829. We'd be glad to give you a second opinion on your portfolio.
Call 833-652-7829 for your own complimentary retirement readiness review and risk report. Why take unnecessary risk when you don't have to? At 65 years old, would you drive to the grocery store at 100 miles per hour if 40 miles per hour would get you there safely? When nearing retirement, are you still driving your investment accounts like you're in your 30s or 40s? Have you changed your investment election since you first chose them in your retirement accounts at work? Call Stewart and his team at 833-652-7829 for your own complimentary retirement readiness review and risk report. Do you know exactly how much risk you are taking in your investment accounts? Now that you've accumulated a nest egg for retirement, you want to be certain the risk you're taking in those investments matches your goals and objectives. Call Stewart and his team, 833-652-7829 for your own complimentary retirement readiness review and risk report, or use the QR code below to begin scheduling your appointment. You may not have time to recover from taking too much risk.
Welcome to the Asset Preservation Hour. I'm Rob Hurtig here with my good friend Stewart Willis.
Hey, Rob, how's it going?
Man, it's going great. It's going great. I love spending this time with you talking about this stuff. It's all really important.
I think so. We've, I've planned our life around planning our clients' lives.
Right. That's interesting. So you've got a topic here that it's a broad topic because almost everybody has, and we're talking about 401ks, but we're talking about 401ks in conjunction with diversification, because diversification is also a big topic that you talk about here on the show. Yeah.
So when we talk about 401ks, this also applies to thrift savings plans, deferred compensation if you're a state employee, 457s, 403bs, all of those sort of deferred tax accounts here. So most people, Rob, are really concerned because they're the ones left with making the decisions of the underlying investments when it comes to those accounts.
There's a lot of them too.
Right. So if you're in a thrift savings plan, does it make sense to be in the C fund or the G fund? Or, now we're starting to see target date funds even, permeating into the thrift savings plan.
And all the names look alike, right? They do.
It's just really, really tough. And, you've heard my ranting on about how I don't like target date funds in the past. And I think, now we're seeing them in the federal government funds, which I think I'm not super happy about. I don't think they're a real benefit. But what I think is really important for the audience to really know what their options are, because people are really concerned that they can't seek help on their 401k plans.
A lot of people think it's naive, but a lot of people think that that's their only option too. It's not their only option, right?
No, I think, once you turn 59 and a half, many companies have made it, so that you can actually roll out. You can do an in-service distribution to go have your 401k rolled to an IRA and then subsequently professionally managed. Now, this isn't the right decision for all people because there's some constraints and some downsides. For example, there's certain ERISA legal protections on 401ks that don't exist in IRAs in all states. There's also loan provisions that you may not want to forfeit. It all depends on your situation. That's why it's really important to seek professional help. But the benefit of being able to roll out a 401k into an IRA, one of which is, having professional help oversee it. Not only that, it's also about being able to get, do some real tax planning.
Yeah.
And asset preservation, most people remember that, we have a tax office. We have a full service tax office. In our Surprise office, we're now opening our tax division in Scottsdale as well. And right now we're filming here in our Tempe office, which is an amazing office. But the purpose of our tax office isn't just tax preparation, it's tax planning. And what goes into that? People say, okay, well, you talk about this tax planning. What does that mean? Well, what tax planning is, let's say you have a 401k. I'll stick on the 401k subject. If you have a 401k and you say, hey, I want to take advantage of these super low tax rates that we're in right now, and I want to convert to Roth. Well, most people's 401ks or thrift savings plans don't allow them to shift from a 401k to a Roth, or TSP to a Roth, or deferred compensation to Roth. So that's when you need to have an outside firm do it if your firm doesn't allow that. And the important thing isn't just to willy-nilly guess at doing a Roth conversion. It's really important. There's a lot of landmines out there that you want to avoid.
There's a lot of moving parts, and we live in a world of do-it-yourselfers, and you have all this information available to you on YouTube, or you just Google it and you can find an answer, right? But there's real repercussions for not getting it right.
Yeah, so I had somebody watching our show and, kind of decided to go it on their own. And I say all the time, do not start doing Roth conversions on your own. Seek tax advice, whether it's from us or your CPA or someone else that has, the professional background to be able to give you real advice on that. Because I'll give you an example. I had a client that said, oh yeah, we're in the, lowest tax environment in history, which we are. So he went and converted his entire $1 million IRA at once. Well, what he didn't realize by doing it on his own was, he was okay with paying the 37% tax that he'd be in, but what he didn't think about was all the penalties that would be on his Medicare. He didn't think about the net investment income tax. There's all of these additional taxes that come in once you cross certain tax thresholds. There's the phase outs now in other parts of his tax return. So I think it's really important to make sure you get tax help and do real tax planning. And I think that's the one missing piece.
Well, we talked about Social Security earlier today, and one comment you made about Social Security was that Social Security by itself is not what we're talking about. We're talking about how Social Security works with everything else, and I think that's what we're talking about here as well.
Yeah, it's just a piece of a plan. When you talk about Social Security or you talk about tax planning, I'm not talking about when you go and do your taxes, every February, March, April. That's tax preparation. And if you're doing tax planning during tax season, that's a tremendous mistake. And I'll tell you why. Listen, our tax people, God bless them, they're working 10, 15-hour days during tax season. Do you really want advice from somebody who's, struggling to make it through the day?
I want somebody that's on point,
right?
That understands it's clear and crisp.
The best time to do tax planning is after tax season is over. So even right now, in the middle of the year, tax planning makes a lot of sense because we're seeing this very, low market. So maybe it makes sense to do a Roth conversion now. And I'm not saying to do it all now, but, never do tax planning during tax season. It is a year-round thing, but if you're doing it listen, these tax preparers, they just want to be done filing taxes. They have hundreds of tax returns they've got to get through by April 15th. Remember, for the last 2 years, we've had until May.
Right.
This year was the first year in 2 years that we've actually not had that extra month.
And what you're talking about the difference between being reactive, right, to the rules changing, and being proactive and taking advantage of what we know the rules are today.
Yeah, and that's what having a holistic plan is all about. You know, the first thing, people ask me all the time, well, what should I look for in a financial advisor? Number one, you want to make sure that, most importantly, that your financial advisor is a fiduciary, a true fiduciary. Number two, what you want to do is make sure they're a holistic planner. And by a holistic planner, we mean, do they do estate planning in-house? Do they do tax planning? Do they do investment planning, income planning, retirement planning, pension planning, all of that stuff in-house? Do they consider all of those other risks? Do they look at your insurances as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started out talking about diversification within 401ks and employee-sponsored plans.
Yeah.
So how do we help someone in the audience determine if they are diversified within their portfolio? Are they invested the way they should be? Is it appropriate for where they're at this phase in retirement? What do they do? How do they know?
Well, I think it's most important to get a second opinion. Like my good friend Brian Kawanta always says from Pennsylvania, you can't get your second opinion from the guy who gave you the first. So what we're offering the audience today is a complimentary portfolio review, where we will take a look at whether or not you're diversified. What kind of risks are you taking inside your portfolio? Are there any tax planning ideas that we have that can save you money, not just right now, but down the road as well? Do you need to do any legacy planning? We'll do that all complimentary, but you have to take action today. Give us a call at 833-652-7829 or click on that QR code. We'd be glad to help.
Call 833-652-7829 right now for your retirement readiness review. Having a clear path to retirement is more than just your savings. This review will include a complete risk analysis on your portfolio, an in-depth fee analysis to determine how much you are and could be paying on those investments, a tax reduction report, and lastly, we'll look at health care and legacy planning for you and your estate. To begin your retirement readiness review, call Stewart and his team at 833-652-7829 or use the QR code to schedule your appointment today. Whether your retirement is coming soon or you want to be certain you can stay retired, the Retirement Readiness Review will help guide you through your financial planning needs. Call Stewart and his team at 833-652-7829 or use the QR code to schedule your meeting today.